Look at this. This is my MacBook. If I swipe to the next desktop, this becomes Windows. If I swipe again, this becomes Ubuntu. 3 operating systems are running on one laptop and I can toggle between them without a restart. So how is this possible? Today, I'll show you how I run Windows and Linux on my Mac using Parallels Desktop, and why this setup makes my work much easier. On macOS, I use Xcode for iOS development. That part is simple, but I also work on embedded systems. For example, I am writing firmware for this PCB with a Nordic chip. For that, I use Keel UVision. The problem? Keel only runs on Windows, so I have 2 choices: buy a Windows laptop, or run Windows on my Mac. Buying another machine sounds simple, but it creates new problems. If I go to a cafe or travel, I don't want to carry 2 laptops. I also work with Linux. Sometimes I use Ubuntu for Docker, testing, and backend tools. So now I need macOS, Windows, and Linux. That's too many machines. So instead, I use Parallels Desktop. Parallels Desktop lets you run Windows and Linux inside macOS. It works like this. macOS is your main system. Windows and Ubuntu run like apps inside it. You do not need to reboot. You do not need dual boot. Everything runs at the same time. Parallels Desktop has been around for nearly 20 years and is used by millions of Mac users worldwide. It's one of the most established virtualization platforms on macOS, especially for professionals who rely on Windows and Linux tools every day. Here is Windows 11 running inside Parallels. I can open Keel and work on firmware normally. USB devices work. Performance feels smooth. I can also run Power BI here. Now here is something very useful. There is a feature called Coherence Mode. When I enable it, Windows apps appear directly inside macOS. They sit next to my Mac apps, just like native apps. So I can open Keel from my Mac dock. It feels like part of macOS. This makes switching very easy. Here I run Docker. For example, I run my Python ECG Analyzer project inside Docker in Ubuntu. The server runs in Linux, but I open the web interface directly from my Mac browser. So, Linux backend, Mac frontend. Same laptop, no complicated setup, and when I finish, I just shut down Ubuntu. Another thing I like is file sharing. My Mac folders, even iCloud, are available inside Windows and Ubuntu. So I access any file or directory inside Windows or Ubuntu. Copy and paste works between systems. Clipboard works. Networking works automatically. Now that we've seen Parallels in action, let's install it properly. First, open the official link from the description of this video. It will take you straight to the Parallels site to grab the correct version so you can follow along. On the site, you'll have a few choices. The standard edition is great for everyday personal use, but if you're a developer or power user, I highly recommend the Pro Edition. It lets you assign significantly more processing power and memory to your virtual machines, which is essential for heavy workloads like spinning up Docker containers, compiling cross-platform apps, or doing data analysis. And if you're buying for an entire team, they have a Business Edition that adds centralized license management and automated deployment. Once you pick your edition and check out, you will be prompted to download the installer file. Once the DMG file is downloaded, open it and follow the installation steps. It installs just like any other Mac application. Now let's install Windows. When you launch Parallels Desktop for the first time, it automatically detects your Apple Silicon Mac. You will see the option Get Windows 11 from Microsoft. Just click Install Windows 11. It will automatically download and install the latest Windows 11 on your Mac. Parallels is officially authorized by Microsoft to run Windows 11 on Apple Silicon Macs. This isn't a workaround or an unofficial hack. It downloads the correct Windows 11 ARM version directly from Microsoft and configures everything automatically. So you're running a supported and stable setup. It creates the virtual machine. It configures the virtual hardware. It completes the installation. You don't need to download any ISO file manually. You don't need to configure BIOS. You don't need to deal with complicated setup steps. Everything is automated. This is one of the biggest advantages of using Parallels instead of manually configuring virtual machines. After a few minutes, Windows 11 will boot inside macOS. From there, you can sign in, install applications, connect USB devices, and start working immediately. Now let's install Ubuntu. Open the Parallels Control Center and click the plus icon to create a new virtual machine. choose Install Windows or another OS, you'll see pre-configured Linux options like Ubuntu, Fedora, and Kali Linux. You can also use your own ISO file if you want a specific version. For this example, I selected Ubuntu. For Ubuntu, we have two options: Standard Ubuntu and Ubuntu with Rosetta. Ubuntu with Rosetta lets you run Intel-based Linux apps and Docker containers on an Apple Silicon Mac by translating them to work with ARM chips. Parallels automatically configures CPU, RAM, storage, and networking. You can customize these settings, but even the default configuration works perfectly for development tasks. After installation completes, Ubuntu runs side by side with Windows and macOS. No reboot required. Now let's talk about performance. Inside the configuration panel, you can adjust CPU cores and RAM allocation. If you are running heavy workloads like Docker builds or development tools, you can increase resources. If you only need light testing, you can reduce allocation. This flexibility makes it suitable not just for casual users, but also for serious development work. And one of my favorite features is snapshots. Before testing something risky, create a snapshot. If something breaks, restore instantly. For development work, this is very powerful. And this is not a niche tool. Parallels supports hundreds of thousands of Windows applications on Apple Silicon Macs and has millions of active users globally. It's widely used by developers, businesses, and IT teams. If your work depends on Windows tools, Linux environments, or cross-platform development, this becomes more than convenience. It becomes infrastructure. For me, it replaces multiple machines and keeps everything in one workflow. If your workflow requires Windows or Linux on macOS, use the link in the description to get Parallels Desktop. In this video, I was using the Pro Edition. And if you're a developer, creator, or power user working across multiple operating systems, I strongly recommend choosing the Pro Edition. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.